In this video, we're going to talk about renting versus buying, the pros and cons of each, and I'm going to share with you the best kept secret for them both. Let's get started. I'm Rinde from Rinde, and welcome to the #1 community for real estate, income, and credit. So if you'd like to know what the pros and cons are for renting versus buying, make sure you watch the video to the end and leave a comment below if you need help with anything. So the age-long question has been renting versus buying. Which one is better? And the simple answer is one word: circumstances. Renting versus buying is simply based on circumstances, the circumstances that you're currently in at the time. Sometimes renting is more strategic, sometimes buying is more strategic. It all depends on your circumstances. It depends on your financial position. It depends on your life position at the time. Some people actually have the ability to buy, but they choose to rent. Some people have the ability to rent, but they choose to buy. It all varies, and it's all based on their circumstances because life happens. So the answer to it is all based on circumstances. They both have their good side and they both have their bad side. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about their pros and cons of both renting versus buying. So a perfect example to answer the question of whether or not it's better to rent versus buy would be this market. Right now, inventory levels are very low, driving up prices well beyond what they should be. And that's created a problem in the market where people want to purchase properties, but they can't. They're losing out to bidding wars, and they have historical low interest rates, and they're able to purchase and have the ability to purchase with the down payments, but they can't find property. The inventory is not there. So they're either bidding above, well above what the property is worth, or sitting it out on the sidelines till everything cools down. So this is not a buyer's market, and that's strictly circumstantial because this is the ideal time to buy. That's why renting versus buying is based on circumstances. So with that being said, I'd like to share with you 3 pros and cons for each, renting versus buying, and we're going to actually start with renting. So the first pro to renting is that it's not long term. So as we know, leases actually have a time span. They're either going to be month to month, 1 year, 2 years, but generally they don't have a very long time span, giving you the ability to be able to move or do what you need to do based on your life circumstances. You're not actually bound to a long time period with that particular property or that particular unit. The second pro to renting is going to be leverage. You have the ability to be able to see and test the market. So for example, if you're in an area and you've been considering whether or not you want to live in that area long term, maybe you're going to start a family, well, it gives you that leverage and opportunity to be able to see the area without having a commitment to it, so to speak. Although you're committed to your lease, as we know, your lease is actually not long term in the grand scheme of things. So you're able to actually leverage that property by actually using it to be able to test the area, see if the school system is good, see if there's changes that have happened with the crime rate, see if there's things that are actually coming to town to make the town more appealing, such as maybe more malls or things that will actually drive up property value. It's also a good way to be able to position yourself to see which way the market is going to go. Many times we have renters who will actually position themselves in an area, and they'll watch the market. They'll see if it's fluctuating up or down, and they'll ride the wave and they'll get it right in just time and then pull the trigger on maybe buying at a strategic time because they've rented in the area. They've leveraged the area and the unit where they lived to be able to see what the market is doing. And the third pro to renting is that it's less down payment. So as we know, with your renting, you're just basically putting up your security deposit and perhaps maybe your first month's rent. So whatever that is, you agree to it and actually you remit that and you have the unit. So the cons of renting is, number 1, no equity. So with a regular residential rental, you're not having any equity buildup. What you're doing basically is paying the landlord monies every month towards your rent to cover yourself and your agreement. But you're not building up any equity there. You're going to work, you're having your income come in, and you're paying them to basically use that space that as part of your agreement, as per the lease, for the time period that you guys have established. So there's no equity buildup during that period of time. And the second con to renting is that you must pay. So whether or not rent prices go up, whether or not there are circumstances in your life, such as a job loss or other things, medical problems, you're still obligated to make that payment. And most likely you need to make that payment before the 5th of the month to avoid a late fee. There's a much more stringent and scrutinized process when you're renting because you actually are on the hook to be able to pay that person that money because they probably needed to pay their mortgage. And really, you sign a lease. So, you know, if you don't pay by the 5th, they can tack you with a late fee, whatever you agree to. Sometimes it's $25, sometimes it's $50. But really, you're on the hook to pay most likely around the 1st of the month. So the third con with renting would be eviction. So with renting, you actually run the risk of being evicted if you don't pay. So the landlord simply has to file in court and basically ask for possession of the property. And they're either going to submit to the judge or the court documents that provide that you either have not paid your rent or breach of lease. So there are terms that they put in the lease that if you breach those leases, they can actually use those as grounds to be able to go and get you evicted. There is a process with eviction. There's a way that you will have an opportunity to be able to state your side of it. But again, you're in someone else's space and there's nothing anchoring you there other than the lease. If the lease is breached, if there's non-payment of rent, that landlord has a right to be able to go to court and ask for possession of the property. And if they win, then there's a timeline given to you to either post up the money that you've not paid or work out something with them to actually get back on good terms. And if it's not consummated, then it's a writ of possession that's going to be issued where they'll have a sheriff come out and actually remove you from the premises. So that's a con when you're renting. That's something you need to be aware of, because eviction is something that the landlord can actually process to be able to get you out of the property if the lease is actually breached. Now with buying or owning, the first pro would be collateral or equity. So you're actually going to be having equity buildup or collateral on your hands when you actually have a property. You've signed up for this property. This property has now been deeded over to you. The deed is in your name. And so whatever the market does, whether the market goes up or it goes down, whether there's equity appreciation in that market or not, you are actually the beneficiary of that blessing or curse. Either way it goes, you actually have collateral, and that collateral gives you the entitlement to be able to either get equity or not. If the property actually is in a declining market, you're going to bear the brunt of that as well. So although that is a pro, it's something to actually keep in mind, because there's a double-edged sword depending on the market and depending on which way your market goes. So the second pro that you have as a buyer or owner would be your tax advantages. So you have better tax advantages when you actually own property versus when you rent. There are things that your accountant or your tax preparer can make sure that they include to give you a better tax advantage when you file your taxes. The third pro when you're actually buying or owning would be leverage. So you actually have the ability to be able to use that property and leverage more. So leverage can go different ways when you're buying your own. You can actually sublease the property. You can actually rent out space in the property to get additional streams of income. You can actually leverage the property itself if you have enough equity build up to be able to use that equity to purchase other property. There are many ways that you can actually leverage the property strategically if you know what you're doing. The first con to buying or owning would be that it is binding. So it's a long-term investment. You're actually going to be taking out a mortgage or a loan or buying cash, and you're going to be in it for the long term. So you're going to be responsible for taxes, for water, and most mortgages come with either 30 or 40-year mortgages. So you have an amortization schedule that's going to be issued to you, and you're going to have monthly payments that you're going to be responsible for as long as you own that property and the deed is in your name. You're going to be responsible for making payments for the next 30, 35, 40 years. So it's a binding agreement. It's long term. You sign a mortgage and a note, and that is a con when you're buying or you're owning. The second con for buying or owning would be that it's a big investment. So for most people, buying a property is their biggest investment of their lifetime. You're going to actually be responsible to come up with a big and large down payment to be able to purchase this property. So you have to keep that in mind, that it's not for the weak. Not only do you have to actually come up with down payment, but most times if you're buying via mortgage, you need to make sure that you factor in having monies for things such as escrow accounts. Maybe they want to have money and seasoned for insurance and other things that basically will go towards the house purchase. And so you need to make sure that you have more money than just the down payment, because it's a very large investment when you're purchasing a property. The third con for buying versus owning would be foreclosure. So as we know, when you buy a property, you actually have a mortgage and a note issued to you. And the mortgage basically gives you a amount that you need to pay on a monthly basis. And if you don't pay that, and you actually go maybe 90 days without paying, as I've shared in many of my foreclosure videos, then a lis pendens is issued against you, and they start the process of foreclosure against you. They send you first a notice of intent to foreclose, and then that begins the process. So whether you're in a judicial or non-judicial foreclosure state, you'll know basically by the terms that's set forth when you sign the note, and they'll spell it out to you. They'll tell you, based on you signing this is what's going to happen if you don't pay. So foreclosure is something that's very real, and it can damage your credit, and it can actually ruin you if you don't know how to navigate that process. Of course, we're experts at dealing with foreclosure, so if you need help with that, you can reach out to us, but that is a big con when you're buying or you're owning a property. So as I've shared with you, I wanted to share with you the big secret. How do you actually combine these worlds and get the best of both worlds out of both renting and also buying? Well, the big secret is simply this: rent to own. Rent to own is actually what we deal in. We deal in bridges over here. We are the bridge for real estate. We actually know how to actually take you from one shore to the next, and that is rent to own. And the main secret that you need to be aware of within rent to own is simply this: benefit of equity. So when you're actually doing rent to own, you actually have the opportunity to not only rent, but also have the benefit of a buildup of equity. You can actually rent the property, test the market out, see what's going on, see if it's somewhere you want to anchor in, you want to keep your family in. And the equity appreciation, you have the benefit of it at the end of that agreement. You can't do that when you're doing just a regular residential lease. You can't have the benefit of equity, but in rent to own, you can. You're able to actually have the best of both worlds, where you can actually merge testing the market out, all the pros that are on the rent side and all the pros that are on the buy side, where you can actually purchase property. You're doing both simultaneously. So we'd like to show you how to actually have the benefit of equity, how to actually do rent to own very easily. If you'd like to know more about how to buy properties rent to own without using banks, without using institutional lenders, without using your credit, without straining yourself, but buying properties easily, properties with large bedrooms, properties with driveways, with backyards, with all these amenities that we've seen have been very valuable throughout this pandemic season, it's important for you to know that these properties do exist and they are out there, and you have the ability to get them now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to go through this whole process of working and building up your credit for years and saving up all this money. You can actually go into a rent-to-own property fairly easily than actually buying a property. But you have the ability to be able to forecast and set yourself up for home ownership long term, 2-3 years down the line. That's what the rent to own program does. So I'd like to invite you to join our rent to own program if you need help. If you're looking to try to buy a property and you need help and you're looking at the rent to own opportunity, you can join our rent to own fast track program. All you have to do is go to my website, askrinde.com, click on rent to own, and get more information to get started today. Also, if you're interested in actually learning more about rent to own and using it as a business where you want to make money with it, you want to learn the ropes and learn how to actually not only find the properties, but do the deals, help families, put them into properties, and actually have win-win situations all around. Join my rent to own VIP program by going to my website and clicking on rent to own and get started today. So I hope that this video was informative to you. If you have any questions or if you have tips on pros and cons of renting versus buying, please leave them in the comment section below. I'd like to know what you think, what the pros and cons are of renting versus buying. So please leave them in the comment section below. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.